In this Tip Tuesday video, we're going to learn about what it takes to become an advantage blackjack player, all right? In fact, we're going to take it kind of step by step and talk about the steps in succession that you're going to need to do and apply before you can probably even go to the casino in order to become an advantage blackjack player. Now, if you're new to my channel, welcome. This is A1 Blackjack, the channel which teaches you how to count cards fast. So if that sounds good to you, stick around because, like I said, we're going to just kind of take this one step at a time. And by the end, you're going to know what it takes to become an advantage blackjack player. All right, the very first thing that you need to know is going to be how to count, right? So obviously, this is called counting cards. And so by learning the count, that's going to be kind of the very fundamental first thing that you need. And it's going to be probably, I would probably call this the easiest thing to know. In fact, for each of these different steps I'm going to talk about today, down in the description of this video, I am going to kind of list out some of my favorite videos on each of those topics. And so maybe you can check that out. So I might even try to put it in the pinned comment as well, right? But the count that I use is called the high-low card counting system. And it uses cards 2 through 6. It assigns these a value of +1, right? Cards 10 through ace, it assigns a value of -1. And because this is what's called a balanced card counting system, cards 7, 8, and 9, these get assigned a value of 0. All right, so together, these 5 and these 5 cancel each other out, right? All these +1s, all these -1s, those are going to get me back to 0 along with these zeros. That's going to keep me at 0. So I could potentially mix all those up and count through them. And if I were to take a card out, that would leave me with what's left. If I count through all those, I can know exactly what's remaining. And therefore, that's why this card counting system works. All right, that is the count. Again, I have more videos of that. If you want to practice, I'll put that down in the description of this video. Okay, the second thing that you need to know if you want to become an advantage blackjack player is learning basic strategy, right? I have a chart that I'll pop up on the screen right here for us. And this is the correct decision that you need to make against every single hand that you could potentially be dealt. All right, so for example, I'll just take some random ones here out of the shoe. And here you can see we have a 5 versus a dealer's king. All right, so a 5 versus a 10. Is there any blackjack? No, there's not. Okay, the correct decision here is just going to be to hit. In fact, anytime you have an 8 or lower, you should always be hitting that, right? But that's also true. Some people get a little mistaken, like let's say I hit this. All right, now I have a 10. Well, now what should I do? Well, again, look at what basic strategy tells you. And a 10 versus a dealer's 10 is also going to be a hit, okay? And so I hit again, and now I have a 19. A 19 versus a 10, should I still hit? No, I shouldn't. All right, now I'm going to stand on this. Again, each one of those. So the 5 versus 10 told me to hit. I would still use basic strategy at this step. It tells me to hit. All right, and then at a 19 versus a 10, now I have to stand. And so obviously, if I stand, I'm not going to be making decisions any longer about the hand. All right, let's see if we can get the dealer to bust. And they did, all right. So that is the second thing you need to know is you're going to memorize that chart. Now, it looks a little bit daunting, but there's some different phrases that you can use. I have some practice sheets where you can write out each row, kind of one at a time and learn those. Most rows only have 1 to 2 different decisions that you're making kind of for each section. And typically they're grouped together. They're not kind of like doing one thing for like a 2, and then another thing for a 3, and then another thing for a 4, and then another thing for a 5 against those dealers up cards. Typically it's a range of like 2 through 6 you're going to stand, and then 7 through ace you're going to hit. All right, for most of the cards, or for most of the rows in basic strategy, you can kind of follow those progressions that way. All right, now there are some special instances for double down and things like that, where, in fact, let me bring out these cards again. All right, so I'm just going to kind of cherry pick a few examples here, but let's say you have a pair of 5s versus a dealer's 9, okay? A pair of 5s should never be split, right? That is an option with pairs, but we're not going to do that here according to basic strategy. In fact, we're going to double down. All right, let's say I double down, I get a 20 versus a dealer's 9, and they would play it out that way. That's very different than getting a 5, or I guess, let's say maybe an 8, all right? And then I hit, right? And then I get a 10 this way. Now this 10, since this is my third card, I can no longer double down, right? You can only double down on your first 2 cards typically at most places. If they do let you do this, you're probably playing a casino variant, which usually have way worse rules It's hard to say. And so I probably would not recommend playing something with a crazy rule set like that, as even though that rule sounds good, they're probably making up for it in a different area. Okay, so be sure that you know how to play that. If it says like 10 versus dealer's 9, it says, yeah, on the chart it says to double down, but if you can no longer do that, then you're going to treat that where as like a 10 where you couldn't double, and you would just hit and you'd go from there. Okay, the third thing that you need to know, and this is probably the most time consuming, is there's a lot of different facets to this, and that's going to be true count conversion. All right, so we have our running counts. We should by now, if you follow those steps and you've perfected the count and you perfected basic strategy, you should be able to, you know, count through a deck and say, you know, like +1, 0, -1, -2, -1, 0, 1, 0, -1, and so on all the way through. In fact, you probably aren't saying minus anymore. I say D, or some people say M for down or minus. M1, M2, you know, as you count through that. But anyway, once you know the counts, you know the running count, well, that's great if you're playing single deck, but that's very rare. All right, most games are going to be either a shoe game like this, where we have 6 decks. A couple have been played already, and there's maybe 4 or so left in there. Or maybe double deck, where there's just 2 decks in play. And so because of that, we need to convert our running count to what's called the true count. Right? The true count is found by taking the running count divided by the number of decks left in the shoe. All right? Or the number of decks remaining. Some people say it that way. And so here, let's say I have this many cards in the discard tray. You need to train your eye to recognize how many cards are there. Right? And I can clearly see that this is just under 2 decks, right? You might need to train your eye a little bit to get there, but to me, I'm seeing just this is probably going to be a deck and 3/4, all right? And so because of that, I know that if that's right around 2 decks that are in there, there's probably 4 decks that are left to be played, as this is a 6-deck game. Now, I often get the question, how do I know how many decks they're playing with? Well, typically on the placard that's on the side of the table, or maybe there's like a neon sign or something like that, or just a light sign, it usually says the type of game it is, like usually 6-deck or double deck are the most common. Occasionally you'll see 8-deck, and then also if there's a single deck game, there's probably gonna be a lot of people at that table, as it's pretty rare, and people like to play single deck. All right, but anyway, you're going to just kind of do the math in your head. Think if 2 decks have been played, there's 4 decks left in a 6-deck game. And then you have to convert that running count. So like, let's say I'm at a running 12 after 2 decks have been played here. So I would take 12 and I'm going to divide by the number of decks remaining. All right. Be careful you don't do it divided by 2. That's going to give you a very incorrect answer. All right, I'm taking 12 divided by 4. 4 decks left here. And so 12 divided by 4, if that was my running count, 12 divided by 4 is going to be a true 3. All right, so that's the first kind of facet of that, is just knowing your deck estimation, which there's some of my favorite drills involve deck estimation, as that has to be just automatic and you're thinking about it very quickly, as that's a number that usually pops into your head for a second while you're keeping that running count on lock and somewhere else in your head. And then you have to go right back to that running count after you use that information to help inform your decisions, both playing and betting. All right, so the other facet with this is, like I said, betting decisions. So let's say we have a true count of +3 here. Maybe you are using a bet spread. I have some greens and blacks out here. Maybe you're using a bet spread that for every true count that is a 1 or higher, this is one of my favorites, is I like to bet that many greens in 2 spots. Okay, so for example, this would represent a true count of 1. So as I did that math and I maybe got a true count there, I would represent a true count of 1. I could put that out there. But like this one, this represents a true count of 3, my example of a running 12 versus, or divided by the 4 decks left. So then, in my bet spread that I'm using, maybe I'm going to bet 3 green chips for $75 in 2 spots. All right. Now, I will say you have to be very careful with this, and I would highly encourage you to get betting software, as you can't just willy-nilly just throw out $75 and expect to be okay at the end of the night if you don't have the bankroll to back it up. All right, a bet that's right now at $150 out here, bankroll that can maybe allow for this would probably be somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000, right, is what your bankroll will need to start with in order to handle the swings of, winning and losing this much per hand. So that said, that actually brings me to today's sponsor, which is blackjackapprenticeship.com. Typically, I don't take sponsors on this channel as I want to give you the most accurate information without it being tainted from a sponsor's kind of view. But Blackjack Apprenticeship is kind of who I model my system after, and they have some of the best training resources out there for people that use high-low card counting. And so that's exactly what I'm doing in this video. They have some of the best drills. My trainings, the training suite, I should say, is one of my favorites things to get on and try to test out my game, see if it's good or not. There's also a members forum where if you join, you can kind of connect with other card counters around the country and around the world even. All right, and there's also Casino 411 if you're planning a blackjack trip, right, and you want to play some advantage blackjack. You can see which casinos maybe have good rules compared to maybe not so good rules, areas you want to play that maybe have a bunch of casinos you can pop in and out of, and maybe some other areas that you want to avoid where they might be a little bit more sweaty. All right. Also, they have a full-length training course on there that's, I believe, I want to say it's over 100 videos or so that Colin has, including some of the bonus material that they put on there. But Colin does just an A1 job, if you might say. So he does a fantastic job of putting his whole site together, from the drills to the training videos to the forum. And then probably what's worth just the cost of admission itself is the pro betting software. That's what I was talking about earlier, where you need to evaluate your bet spread so that you know for a fact that you have a winning bet spread and you are not over betting your bankroll. You're keeping your risk of ruin nice and low so that you can play this for a long time and grow that over time so that you can help maximize your wins. All right, so thank you to Blackjack Apprenticeship for sponsoring this video. That brings me to the fourth and the last piece of information that you need to become an advantage blackjack player, and that is going to be the deviations. All right, so for example, let me get some cards out here. Okay, so again, I'm cherry picking some of these cards. Let's say we have an 8 versus a dealer 6. Now, back on that basic strategy chart that I showed you earlier, an 8 versus a dealer 6 is clearly going to be a hit, right? We always hit our 8s. It doesn't matter what the dealer's up card is. However, there are certain times where what we get compared to what the dealer has, it becomes advantageous for us to deviate or go against what basic strategy says and do something else. Now, typically this involves, splits or double downs or chances for us to get more money out on the table because we want to maximize our wins as card counters, right? Now, there's other times where we want to mitigate some of the losses, but for the most part, most of the deviations that we memorize as card counters, it helps us maximize our wins. So for example here, an 8 versus a dealer 6 is typically a hit, but you might think on that chart a 9 versus a 6 or a 10 versus a 6, so just a couple cards higher, well, then we're going to double down. And so what would it take for us to double down an 8 versus a dealer 6? And it's actually going to be just a true count of +2 or higher. So if we kind of continue what we had earlier, maybe with that running 12 divided by 4 decks left, well, if that was a 12, now we're at 13, 14, 15. 15 divided by 4 decks left is still going to be, if we round down a little bit, it's still going to be a running, or a true 3, I should say, a true count of 3. And at a true count of +2 or higher, it becomes advantageous for us to double this down. All right, so I'm going to double down, which means I get exactly one more card. And here it looks like I have an 18 versus a dealer 6. So I can't do anything else with this because I've already doubled. Let's see if we can get the dealer to bust here. That's typically what we want to happen when they start with a 6. I have 16 and 26. All right, so I would double up my bet here. All right, and then we can go on and play maybe a different hand that potentially could have other deviations. All right, now there's the thing called the illustrious 18 that are the most profitable 18 deviations that you should probably know. However, I have made what I consider my top 30 deviations, and I sell some basic strategy flashcards that I know a lot of you have purchased and you're really happy with. The way that I would read this, for example, this is a 9 versus a dealer 7. All right, so your cards are the 2 that you get on the bottom versus the dealer's card up top. And then on the back side, I just put out some kind of what the basic strategy says on top and what the deviation is and the true count that it occurs at the bottom here. All right, so there are 30 of these that I would recommend there's also, if you have surrender available to you, surrender is a chance for you to, if I was like betting $50, you would give up half of your bet, right, in order to forfeit playing the hand. Right, that is very beneficial, especially for a hand like a 16 versus a dealer's 10. All right, a 16 versus a dealer's 10. Whether you hit this or you stand, you are more than likely going to lose either way. Okay, because if I stand on this and the dealer, maybe they have another 10 underneath and they get a 20 or something like that, well, I didn't win. If I hit this, I'm pretty likely to bust, just like the dealer bust when they had 16 in that last situation. So either way here, you are likely to lose. But if you can surrender, then you will only lose half of your bet as opposed to the whole thing by hitting or standing, more than likely. All right, there are decisions like that that involve surrender that are also profitable deviations to know, called the Fab 4. Now this one, a 16 versus 10, that's not included in the Fab 4, but there are others that are kind of right around that you might want to know, like 15 versus dealer's 10, and some others that are included in that. So those are the 4 things that you need to know if you want to become an advantage blackjack player. We have the count, the running count specifically, basic strategy, true count conversion, which involves both deck estimation, converting to the true count, dealing with your bets, and also the count when it happens for some of those playing deviations. So that's kind of a big one. And then the last one is the playing deviations themselves. Okay, so if you like this type of video, please give me a thumbs up down below. Also be sure to check out Blackjack Apprenticeship. I'm going to put their link down below in the pinned comment of this video. And then for each of those different 4 kind of steps it takes to become an advantage blackjack player, I also have a video, at least one, on each of those down below as well. All right, so until next time, guys, remember this is A1 Blackjack.